name is Barnaby Faull. I'm the director of the banknote department here at Spink's. We've done banknotes here for about 30 years or so, or something like that. The banknote market is a very new market, comparatively speaking. People have collected coins, Greek and Roman coins, for hundreds of years. People have collected stamps for 150 years or something like that. Banknotes really in the last 30 years have become a very, very popular market. But it's got a new market.
How do you explain that?
Because in my opinion, I mean, if you go back, it's human nature. When you're a child, you go on holiday, you collect coins from your holiday and you throw them in a drawer. A banknote is worth money, you change it back. If you get sent a letter by a relative in France or Africa or wherever, you cut the stamps off because they're attractive and they're interesting. If one child who cuts a stamp off an envelope, out of 1 million people who do that, decides to put money into the market and collect stamps, you have a big market. The same thing with coins. Everybody has old coins lying around in their drawers. And if 1% or 1/100% collect from that, you have a big market. Banknotes, people never did that. They never put them away because it was too much money. So you don't have the natural start that you would have in stamps and coins. But I think nowadays people are very keen on nostalgia. They look to the past a lot. People are very fond of the things that have gone. And most things, even currency now, is beginning to go. Everybody uses a credit card. Cash in your pocket is becoming rarer and rarer. People like links with the past. A banknote is 20 times bigger than a stamp, much better printed, because it has to be, because it's money. In other words, they are very attractive representations of the country that issued them. There's a lot going for a banknote. So, I think it's a logical thing. They should be collected. They are now being collected. A few things here. For example, this is a Palestine currency note. It's £50 in Palestine, dated 1929. Well, £50 in 1929 would have probably bought you a street. So in other words, it's an enormous amount of money, which meant that they didn't get left lying around. They were all cashed in. They're extremely rare. We picked this collection up from a client in Israel who's written a book on his collection. He's getting old now. The time has come to sell. A note like this 20 years ago would have been a £1,000 item. We expect this to sell for about £20,000 to £30,000 in auction, because Palestine is a very, very popular collecting area. It's very popular with the Jewish population, with the Middle Eastern population. You have a lot of Jewish people, for example, in America who collect Palestine and Israel. You have a lot of Palestinians who are no longer in Palestine for obvious reasons, who have moved all over the world. So you have a Middle Eastern market, the Jewish market, and then the general collector's market. So a lot of people will collect something. It's a real piece of history. And what we have here a Hong Kong banknote dated 1902, a $10 note from Hong Kong. A lot of people who used to run the banks in the Far East, as far as we're concerned here, would have British managers with British banks. They would have souvenirs. They would bring them back over here. The family would then discover them. 50 years after their grandfather had died, they'd find a banknote in the back of an old book. It was worth $10 then in 1902. Now it could be worth again £15,000, £20,000. So it's a completely different story. And I think my favourite notes, the old Bank of England notes, the black and white notes like this, which are very famous, all Bank of England notes are worth face value back to the very beginning. You could take this banknote, which is dated 1927, to the Bank of England, they will give you £10 for it still. We would give you a lot more, but they will give you £10, which is why Bank of England notes are very rare. And there's no other country in the world you can say the same thing about. If you had an old French note, it's been demonetised many, many times. We deal a lot with the French Revolutionary assignat. It would be marvellous to go to the Bank of France with an assignat and say, I would like to claim my money. They're going to tell you to go away. This, you can go to the Bank of England, they will give you the money for it, even today. Even for a note dated 1790, it's still good money. Although worth much more to a collector, of course, so don't change it at the bank or anything like that. And the same thing applies with American money, but they started in like 1860 or 61. The Bank of England started in about 1790, which I think is what makes them interesting. Also, during the Second World War, the Germans copied all the Bank of England notes. The idea being that if you copy the currency, you fly over London and you drop millions and millions of banknotes. It's fantastic. You find £1,000 lying on the road, but very soon that £1,000 is going to be worth nothing at all. And the story that I like to believe about the English banknotes is that the Germans, being very correct about everything, produced a perfect banknote. But the real Bank of England note is not a perfect banknote. And the Germans corrected the mistake, which is why they could tell in 1939, if a spy came over here, was given this money by the German authorities, was told the note was perfect, you would have to put your name and address on the back of the banknote, because a £5 note was an enormous amount of money. You'd have to put your name and address on the back of the banknote. To refuse would be very suspicious. The banknote would go back to the Bank of England 3 weeks later. The Bank of England would see the note. It's a forgery, issued by the Germans. They have the name and address of the spy who gave it in, and they would go and arrest him. So they found all the spies who came here because they could detect the money. And I love the story that the real notes are not perfect, but the Germans, being very correct, made a perfect note, which is not real. So anyway, there are all sorts of little stories about currency. So it's not just the note, it's the story that goes behind them that makes it interesting.
What about the first banknotes?
The first banknote, as in many things, was Chinese. The Ming Dynasty, under the 1500s, they produced banknotes on mulberry bark, the bark of the mulberry tree, which are about that big.
Yes.
And they're not actually that rare, and you can still buy one for under, if you like, under £1,000, 1,500 euros or something, which, if you think about it, for a banknote that's 600 years old, is actually not very expensive. But the Chinese produced the first banknote. The Swedish produced the first European banknote in 1666, which was the same year that Spink was founded, so it's a good coincidence. The earliest Bank of England notes are late 1600s, if you like, early 1700s. And I think the earliest French note, because everyone used coin, really. People didn't trust paper, because a gold coin is a gold coin. A bit of paper is only as good as the government that issue it. But the first French money you see in any quantity is revolutionary assignats. So you're talking about the late 1780s, 1790s, something like that. American notes, there's the War of Independence produced banknotes, but they're small card notes for the states. The first US currency proper is really around about the 1860s, the time of the Civil War.
What about your next auction?
Well, the next auction, we have two sales coming up. This sale here is a sale of world banknotes. There's a picture. This picture is taken off of Portuguese India. So in other words, it's the international nature of the business. It's a perfect illustration here. You've got on the front of the cover a banknote from Portuguese India. You've got on the back of the cover a South African note, which is, there's only two sets of this particular note known, so extremely rare. A banknote from Manchester, so you've got the local interest, and a banknote from India, which is extremely rare, so you take advantage of the new markets coming up. So you're actually covering the world, if you like, on your cover. And inside we've got about 1,000 lots of world banknotes of all kinds of countries. Obviously we tend to specialise in English, Scottish and that kind of thing, because that's where we are and that's where you get most notes from. But I like to think that we are, you know, what we call over here a jack of all trades. We can deal with, if someone brings a Hong Kong banknote, a Chinese banknote, an American note, a Romanian note, a Guatemalan banknote, we have an opinion on it. Hopefully right. So we will cover the world.
Okay, so thank you very much.
No trouble, thank you.